Welcome to another Third Apron podcast. I'm your host, Yossi Goslin, NBA salary cap analyst, here again with my co-host Sam Quinn. Trade deadline has been passed now for about 3 weeks now, and he and I have been busy reacting to all the trades, reacting to all the tanking crisis, all the ideas that people have been pitching on the internet. And now we want to talk about something that we tried to talk about back in the summer. We didn't organize it at all really well. It is front office rankings. This is something that Sam does every year now. How long have you been doing it for now? And is it usually like this time of year, or do you do it like multiple times a year?
So we officially codified it last February, with the idea that we were going to do it every February and every July. I'd certainly done it before last February, but it had been sporadic. So yeah, we officially have started the exercise of twice a year after the trade deadline and then after the main off-season cycle in July. And the idea is we're going to move forward with that twice a year. And then I guess for our purposes, maybe we won't go through all 30 teams both times moving forward, but maybe the way to do this is what we're doing now, which we're going to cover 10 teams per episode, so 3 episodes total. And then in July, just do one episode about the teams that move, the changes, et cetera, et cetera. But I do these rankings for CBS Sports twice a year.
So I think I don't really know of how many other people do this, but I think the way you do it is really great. Definitely, like the responses I see online is like all the reactions are extremely thought provoking. Like the way you go about it, your process, your critiques, whether they are your praises, whatever it is, it's all well thought out. So I think the best way to go about this is we'll just kind of go through your order. I'm sure we'll align on a lot of things. Before we start, everyone, if you're tuning in, make sure you follow us on Twitter at SamQuinnCBS, at Yossi Goslin. You can subscribe to Third Apron where we get podcasts, and you can subscribe to Third Apron, the Substack. We're having a sale right now. Anything else you want to touch on before we get started? Maybe anything about your process?
So people do question some of the things about it. I think where I diverge from a lot of people is I do place a fair amount of weight into track record, where there are a couple of teams. I think Utah is one that comes up every time I do these rankings. Philly is another one where you can question some of the more recent stuff, but if a general manager has been very, very good at running NBA teams for a long time, I do count that. Now, that being said, if you have a long track record of being very good, but the last few years are, let's say, a little bit more inexplicable, that will count as well. Like Miami is ranked a lot lower than I think some other people would rank them. But if you just factor in everything, the broad idea here is, who would you want to run your favorite team, whoever it is, with the idea being how, if you're trying to win a championship for your favorite team, who would you trust to run it between the owner, the scouts, the cap people, the front office? I don't count coaches. I do give credit for coaching hires, but a good coaching staff is sort of a separate thing. So it's basically, who would you trust as the architects to run your favorite team? Factor in trades, free agency, the draft, cap management, intangible stuff, anything you could think of that they would be playing a part in.
I've got like 6 particular criteria when I think about my rankings. I don't have an exact ranking, but I have like a general idea of where I would place each team. To your point uh, about a track record, I I don't consider it too much because, like you mentioned with Miami, you could fall off. Like one of those teams could fall off pretty quickly depending on their how what they've done recency. Like Miami is kind of like a team that most people would say consistently is like a top 5 to 10 organization, but a lot of people might not feel quite as strong for them right now. I think like for me, that was kind of like Toronto recently,
Fell
more
off quick.
where last decade you can make a case that they were a top 2 or even 3, like a 3 or even 2 organization in the 2010s, and then and then like maybe everything they've done since, with the exception of Scotty Barnes, you can make a case was maybe like lower tier type track record. So it could fall off quickly.
We won't be
So
talking
yeah,
about Toronto for a little while. That being said, there is something I do want to
yeah.
say, that there inevitably are teams that are ranked below average that their fans get a little upset about that. What I'm broadly going to tell you, there are more smart teams than dumb teams. You'd agree with that, right? Like there are very few teams right now that are acting in ways that I think Yossi and I would describe as indefensible. Really, I think it's only 3 teams right now, and I think you can guess who they are. For the most part, it is generally different degrees of smart to at least we understand what they're trying to accomplish. So just because a team is ranked 21st or 22nd or something, that's not us saying that they're bad. That's us saying, like, compared to the rest of the league, we like what they're doing a little bit more.
I think the last decade, like in the 2000s, I don't think there were really any teams that were so far ahead or even like kind of operating in a similar level as the median team this year, just because there wasn't a big focus on analytics. That really changed everything. And the Lakers were able to like coast pretty far. And then like the whole league kind of once they got more into analytics, kind of passed them in some ways. And you think about like the top maybe 5, 6 teams in the previous decade that were operating on the highest levels. Now it seems like, yeah, 25 teams are operating on that level. And then there's maybe like a small six of the league that are still kind of behind in that way. And I think that kind of has to do, it kind of goes hand in hand with why tanking has become such a problem now, where like under this system, it makes sense to tank. It makes sense to lose games, maximize your lottery odds. And that wasn't as much of a problem in the 2010s. A lot of teams weren't operating in that way. And now we've got multiple teams trying to think about the bigger picture in that regard. So
Yeah, they're all
I
rational
think
actors. As far as
yeah.
tanking goes, they're like, that's it. What has happened in sports, this is not exclusive to basketball, over the last 20, 25 years, is that now that teams and fans and media and everybody actually understands what works and what leads to winning, you have more and more teams acting in the ways that are rational as opposed to the ways that are, like, let's say, the most entertaining, the best for business. So of course, in a 30-team league, 8 teams are going to look and say, we're so far away, it makes the most sense to tank. But yeah, I think you hit on something very important, which is the gap between the smartest teams and the, let's not say the dumbest, the smartest teams and the median team is much smaller than it used to be. Like, spoiler alert, the Thunder are number 1. I think the gap between the Thunder and the middle of the league is actually like relatively small compared to where it had been in the past, where like there was a period where Daryl Morey was the only GM who understood the marginal value of shooting a million threes. Now that's obviously not the case. Like, most of the obvious advantages have been discovered, and the wins are going to therefore be smaller as a result.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think now it's way harder to have an edge in the NBA. I think maybe with some of the rule changes, like with the playing tournament lottery flattening, maybe that kind of helps. That kind of goes into it a little bit. But with the Thunder, I mean, let's just get into it. We might as well get right into your number one controversially picked, the Oklahoma City Thunder. They, the main reason I think they are number one, and they're a great example to talk about how like I don't think they really operated with such a big edge over the past years. They were just the only team that when everyone decided to start pushing for the middle, or when the playing tournament got implemented and lottery flattening happened, they're the one team that decided to go Sixers process, get all the picks they can, liquidate all their players, and now that's paying off. No, there were a couple teams kind of doing it, like the Jazz.
They were
I can't
first.
But the Thunder, like, just they're that 2 year process between 29 to 21, or I guess 29 to 2020, when they just got all the picks they can. Like, it was just a 1 year thing, and they were the only team really like getting all of the picks. Then the teams that started doing it later, kind of late, and that's why the Thunder are where they are. Yeah, I'll lead you to it then. Anything else on why they're number one?
Yeah, I mean, I think you laid it out really well. I think we just talked about the how much smaller the advantages are now compared to what they were 10, 15, 20 years ago. The Thunder might have been like on the last frontier. The idea of liquidating a 50-win team or whatever they were with Paul George and Russell Westbrook was like unheard of. Nobody had ever done that intentionally, right? It had happened to them. There had been teams that were forced to trade away their best players because they wanted to leave, but they had never, like, no team had ever proactively said like, yeah, we could hold on to our guys, they're under contract for multiple more years. They were the team that was bold enough to say like, yeah, we don't want to be a first round playoff team, we want to win a championship. So Paul George came to them and they seized that opportunity and they ran with it. I think what that underlines is that they have just had the best, most coherent long-term vision among any NBA team for the last half decade, maybe more. And ironically, Sam Presti like made a lot of mistakes the first time he had a chance to build a dynasty that I think he's learned a lot from, right? Like he drafted Durant, Westbrook, and Harden all in a row, and that kind of didn't, it fell apart basically. He traded Harden in what looks like one of the worst trades in NBA history. He over-indexed on defense and athleticism, which he
Yeah.
kind of did this time, but was better about adding shooting around it. I think did a better job of building an organizational culture that maximized that. So yeah, they're good at basically everything. It all feeds into this great vision. They're an incredible drafting team. Like, I know people talk about them as one of the faces of tanking. That's not really true. They tanked for 2 years. They get Chet Holmgren, which is great, huge win. They get Josh Giddey, who they turn into Alex Caruso, which is nice. But you tend not to think of that as the result of a tank. Otherwise, it's like Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. They get in the Paul George trade. Jalen Williams, they draft at number 12. He was, I think, the first third-year player not drafted in the top 10 to make an All-NBA team since Kobe Bryant. AJ Mitchell on the margins, Isaiah Joe on the margins, Aaron Wiggins on the margins. They do everything right on the margins. They are kind of writing the blueprint as we speak for how to operate with a massive asset surplus in ways that Houston and Utah and a lot of these similarly run teams are going to be following. Like, case in point, the Jared McCain trade was something that we'd never really seen before. We hadn't seen much of. I mean, I guess the easy comp would be something like the Michael Carter Williams trade, but there's a lot of differences there. What they recognized is they have, like, starting next year, they have all of these financial obligations that are going to come home to roost, where you're going to have to figure out the Isaiah Hartenstein long-term contract. He has a team option. Lou Dort has a team option. They're way above the second apron. Yeah, they could just draft somebody and hope they're good, or you can trade one first round pick and get Jared McCain, who you have a pretty good idea is going to be good because he was going to win Rookie of the Year last year before he got hurt, and you get him under team control for 2 more years after this one. Like, they are really drawing the blueprint right now for how to operate in this manner, and they have a chance to be a dynasty. It's kind of a no-brainer. I don't know what the argument against them at number one would be. I don't know what their weakness is, if they even have one.
I think their only weakness, as you pointed out, was 10 years ago when they just would not, they just couldn't add any shooting to surround Russell Westbrook with, like, that was just, that was the biggest weakness. And yeah, they don't have like a perfect amount of shooting even now, but I think they've figured out how to more have a better, more modern offense. So, like I said, they were the first one to the party as far as accumulating the picks. I think that's a huge reason they are where they are today, but also the execution matters. I think clearly, like, why they're number one is their long term vision, because every move they made dating back to 2019 was all about 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, whatever it is. And they are so far ahead of every other team in the present that even to this day, they don't have to worry too much about maximizing the roster now, how to make it better. They just did this Jared McCain trade. That's kind of about, like, then these next 2 years more so than this season, because maybe he could replace someone else in that back end of the rotation, so they could save more money and they don't have to let go of one of Lou Dort or Isaiah Hardenstein. Like, everything they do to this day is all about tomorrow, which is a like incredible luxury to be operating within that lens when you are currently in a championship position, and you can extend this for like the next 4 or 5 years. And that's especially impressive with the CBA that we're in, that's making it incredibly harder to have a long period of sustained success. So I think clearly the OKC number one. I wouldn't say there's like a huge gulf between like the next few teams, but there is somewhat of like I would put OKC in their own tier still as number one. And how they navigate these next 4 years will probably tell us like historically how great of a front
Mhm.
office. Like we're talking about this maybe being the greatest operation in the history of the NBA this 10-year period. Maybe Presti being one of the greatest, if not the greatest executives in all of professional sports, if they're able to win multiple championships and keep this team together for even like close to a decade. So like that's
Can I
the kind of
boggle your mind with something
that's
about
the
this, by the way, too?
rarefied that's a rarefied territory. I think they're going to be we could be looking at. Go ahead.
The Thunder have done this despite being enormously unlucky when it comes to the lottery. I'm not talking about their own picks. I'm talking about the picks they've gotten from other teams. So what I mean by that is in 2021, they have a top 4 protected swap with the Rockets that they don't get to exercise because the Rockets jump up to number 2. Last year, they had a top 6 protected pick from Philly that they don't get to take because Philly jumps up to number 3. But as you recall, 2 teams jumped ahead of Philly in last year's lottery, Dallas and San Antonio. So if Philly had not gotten the number 3 pick, the Thunder would have gotten the number 7 pick last year. This year, Utah is doing everything in its power to tank its way into keeping the top 8 protected pick and not giving the Thunder any pick whatsoever from the Derek Favors cap dump all the way back. And I think that was 21 or 22, something like that.
Yeah. 21.
But there's another world in which the Thunder get like the number 9 or number 10 pick from the Jazz. Like they've had all of these draft assets turn out to be way less valuable than they should have been because of tanking, because of lottery luck, and they're still in this amazing position. Can you imagine where the Thunder would be if they'd had the lottery luck that the Spurs have had? It'd be like the league would be over. It'd be unfair.
Yeah. In 2020, they got Poku like that. They could have had McDaniels or Quickly. I think like they traded out of those selections. 21, they got Giddy when they maybe could have gotten Franz. Like there were some mistakes along the way, and it just took one trade, the SGA getting SGA for Paul George, and then just one draft, uh, with the 22 draft where they got their other two cornerstones. So that yeah, like, to your point, that is pretty crazy how they could have like probably be running into these really good problems of having way too much talent and trying to figure out what to do with it. They already are kind of in that position. Um, so it's gonna be it's pretty crazy how like they have this excess of picks still. They still have like 12 first round picks over the next 7 drafts. Uh, like yeah, none of the big players like their cornerstones came from that. That was all really them. Like the Jalen Williams pick, I forgot who that was,
That was a
but
Clippers pick.
okay, that was a Clippers pick. That's right. But remember, they traded a bunch of those fake first that they collected
For
over the
Usman
years.
Jang, yeah.
Like keep in mind, Usman Jang went right before Jalen Williams. Like there's a possibility that they just don't take Jalen Williams if they didn't get that Usman Jang pick first. Like things could be pretty different.
They
So
also traded
yeah, there's a lot
Shengun,
of
which I think we should mention as that's kind of a miss, especially because they traded him to Houston specifically. But we're really splitting
yeah.
hairs here. Like they're great. They've made mistakes. Everybody else has made mistakes too. They're pretty unimpeachable. I do think the number 2 team is actually like broadly in the same. I don't know if I would say in the same tier, but if they're not in the same tier, they're in a tier by themselves. So the number 2 team is the Boston Celtics. Do you disagree?
I don't disagree. They've been consistently pretty high up here, even dating back to the previous decade when they had Danny Ainge. I would consider Danny Ainge probably the best exec of the last decade. And now, like, I probably even consider him number one, like in my all-time rankings. But Presti is gonna make a push for that, because Ainge basically did all the things that Presti's doing right now. Just Presti's kind of doing it in a more supercharged version. And this current front office, I think they're doing a really good job. But I wonder if part of the reason Ainge left is maybe teams just didn't want to deal with him anymore. But then maybe that's probably not the case, because then he went to Utah and everyone gave him all their picks anyways. So, but anyways, this front office has been doing a really good job since taking over. And I think the big weakness from for Ainge was he was a little too conservative. Like the biggest
Mhm.
swing he took was trading one of those Nets lottery picks for Kyrie Irving, which was, even to this day, even though Kyrie left, I think you still do that trade like 8, 9 times out of 10. It's like the value they gave up was so little. And that was the only time he would make a big swing like that. Where this uh under Brad Stevens, they've been far more aggressive, took a lot more aggressive risks. They still were able to do these like value trades, like getting Derek White for what is essentially was the Malachi Branham pick, like probably one of a top 5 steal trade in this decade. And just going for it when they did, trading a couple picks for Drew, trading Marcus Smart, which probably wasn't easy, but getting Kristaps Porzingis and 2 first-round picks, that was a heist. Um, and then who else they bring? Yeah, that they brought in all 3 of those guys. I don't know if under Ainge they make all those risks, and that's what they needed. They needed to take some big swings to put this talent around the Celtics, even though it probably shortened their window in the long term. It was finally resulted in a championship. So, like same for the most part, like scouting, negotiating, like a lot of the same like ways that the previous regime operated. I think they're still operating in that same level, but they're a lot more risk averse, and that was needed.
You know what I just realized, which is kind of interesting? The number one team traded Alperen Şengün. The number two team traded Alperen Şengün, and the number three team acquired Alperen Şengün. Just that's like a under the radar move that Boston made, which I think worked out very well, which was trading to get off of the Kemba Walker contract for Al Horford and giving up the pick that became Alperen Şengün. Yeah, it would have been nice if you had Şengün, but Al Horford won them a title and is going to have his jersey retired there. So kind of a no brainer there. The thing that I think the Celtics do better than any other team is look onto the other 29 teams and say, we have a bigger role for this player in mind. We think we can maximize this player in a way that you can't. Derek White being the obvious example of that, where he was good in San Antonio, but he was somebody they were willing to give up for a late first round pick. And he goes there and he becomes like a borderline all star. You go deeper down the bench. Luke Cornett was like that, who was kind of just a middling minimum big man who they turn into like one of the better backup bigs in the NBA. Now I think he's frankly a starting caliber center. He's coming off the bench for San Antonio, but he's capable of being a starter. Neemias Queta is somebody who was just, I can't even remember where he was. He was Detroit. He was somewhere else before Boston, where they bring him in and now he's a starting caliber guy. They are so good at looking at players on other teams and understanding how they can maximize that player. They're very good at hiring coaches. At one point in 2022, they had Ime Udoka, Will Hardy, and Joe Mazzulla on the same staff. I think those are 3 of the top 7 or 8 coaches in the entire NBA, which is kind of unreal. The one thing that Brad Stevens hasn't had to do is build a core, like build a foundation, because he did inherit Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, but he also developed those guys as coaches. And I'm not sitting here saying I don't think he could. I'm just saying he never has, which is the only difference between Boston and Oklahoma City to me. Obviously, getting below the tax this year without giving up a first round pick was a minor miracle. Their cap management has been some of the best in the NBA. The Peyton Pritchard contract is one of the best contracts in all of basketball. I'm not sure if I'll say the best, but certainly among them. Hugo Gonzalez is their first like really big draft win, getting him in the late first round. Jordan Walsh has turned out to be a good find late in the draft as well. I think he was the second, or was he undrafted? Whatever he was, that was a great find on the margins. They do just about everything right. And if it weren't for the Thunder, they would be number one.
No, you make a good point about how he I think most GMs would love to be in Brad Stevens' position where they're thrusted into a team that already has two stars on their team, and now it's just about and you have all your picks, you've got some players of value, and now you just gotta like put the right pieces together. Uh, yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he's still around once it is time to reset the to enter a retool, whatever it might be once this era is over, and how he does it there. Obviously, with Ainge, he got these picks by trading their all stars. So I don't know. We'll see if maybe they end up repeating that, maybe with one of Tatum or Brown in the future. I don't know when that would be.
They
I
had the
don't know if
chance.
I don't know if
We
there's going
we
to be a
talked about
team.
it over the summer. Like they did have offers for Jaylen Brown. There were talks about that.
I
And
mean,
they wisely, I think, decided not to pull the trigger on that.
there's a difference between trading Jaylen Brown after year 9 and trading Paul Pierce and
Mhm.
KG after year 16 or something like that for each of them. Like
They were much older, yeah.
we'll see. Kevin Durant got traded for a whole draft at his 36 at his 16th after 16th season, I think. So you never know. And then you touched on the what they just did with the luxury tax. This just has more to do with the long-term vision, where the a lot of teams might get carried away by a team like the Celtics with Tatum being injured and having lost a lot of veterans to get carried away by the success that they're having in the regular season and think that in the East that they could make a really strong push and potentially go to the finals, and they could still do that. But I think they knew like deep inside, hey, like we can't really maximize this year and the next now that Tatum got hurt. We got to start thinking about like 2 years from now when Tatum will be 1 year removed from this injury. And then we can really make another push, and we'll have more flexibility, more draft picks to reshape the roster around him. So they went ahead and got under the tax. And like the way I'm just saying it, it just really diminishes what an accomplishment it was. They were like, I think it was 40 million over the luxury tax line. Like they saved so much money in less than a year. And I still don't think it's really appreciated, like what an accomplishment this is, because people kind of want to just look at it as like, oh, just cheapness or just saving a bunch of money. It doesn't really matter. No, like this actually like is gonna be really huge 2 years from now. Me and Sam have talked about it a lot, but basically they're gonna be able to spend a lot more money uh
They'll be
in
able to
the
spend with
later.
impunity. They can
Yeah,
spend as much money as they want starting in the 27-28
yeah,
season, basically.
yeah. So not only just having that long-term vision and the discipline to do it, but the execution. Like they didn't even lose a first round pick in this process. So that's where you can maybe even argue, maybe like as far as like these like getting stuff done, execution, the trades, maybe Boston might be top tier in this regard in the league.
I think a good way to put this as I was listening to you was they're just a very responsible organization, right? Like how many GMs would have had Tatum and Brown in 2021 during that year where they were like what, a 6 or 7 seed, right, when they lost to the Nets, and would have said the move here is to trade 4 first round picks for another star. Like remember when Bradley Beal to Boston was like a pretty big rumor because he was from St. Louis and so was Jason Tatum, and like I guess they know each other. Like they're just very, very responsible in the way that they operate. They never really deviate from the plan unless an opportunity comes up that's too good to pass up. Like they weren't planning to trade for Drew Holiday. Drew Holiday just fell into their laps and they said, oh, you know what? There's this chance to get a Hall of Famer right before the season. Let's jump on it. And they paid a pretty hefty price, but they went on to win a championship. And I don't know if they would have won that championship without Drew Holiday. So they're very responsible and they're very disciplined, but they're willing to pull the trigger when the right opportunities present themselves. They have just a very good balance between aggression and caution, where like I think there are also GMs, including like us, we talked about should they trade Derek White? Should they trade Jaylen Brown? I think we were both very, very open to that, depending on what the price would have been. And the Celtics said no. And I look at this right now, and I mean, depending on what Jason Tatum looks like after the Achilles, if he's anything close to where he was in the past, they have a pretty good chance of making it back to the finals next few years, winning another title or two. Like they're very, very well positioned with an almost entirely different supporting cast than their last championship team.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement. They're number two. All right, number three, you've got Houston. I'll let you take it over from here.
Yeah, this is where it starts to get a little bit harder. I think at this point, every team has some blemish that we have to talk about. So the good for Houston is number one, obviously they've done such a good job of accumulating draft picks. That trade with the Nets was right now. I mean, look, we'll see where the Brooklyn 2026 pick ends up. And, we'll never know. Would the Nets have tried to win if they hadn't made that trade? Blah, blah, blah. They turned two pretty good draft assets into four pretty good draft assets, which is an incredible, trade. I don't know how many teams have ever made a move like that. They were kind of at the front of this let's take advantage of the team that needs its own draft picks back trend that Milwaukee and Portland are kind of going through now. And I'm sure other teams will get back into the mix for in the years to come. They are the best negotiators in the entire NBA. They got Alperen Şengün to take less than the max. They got Kevin Durant to take a pay cut. I think that Jabari Smith contract that goes down next year before going back up was very, very intelligently designed. They're so, so good at getting players to just take a little bit less than they might have gotten in another team. And that's really going to add up as they start to deal with the tax and the aprons in the years to come. My big question for Houston, I mean, there are a couple of misses. The Dorian Finney-Smith thing didn't work out. I have two questions here. I think they're both kind of open-ended. Number one, what is going on with Reed Sheppard? It feels like there's a little bit of a disconnect between the front office and the coaching staff here, where the front office is like clearly intentionally not added other guards because they want Ime Udoka to play Reed Sheppard more as a number 3 overall pick who has played pretty well when they put him on the floor. I think that's a good strategy that's warranted. Why won't Ime Udoka buy in? Is there any disconnect here between the front office and the coaching staff? That's a concern that I have. And then the other question that I think is worth gaming out here a little bit more is, do they have somebody that we think will be the best player on their eventual championship team or contending team? Do they have to get a player that is better than who they have now? And I'll put it to you like this way. We had in the past been pretty ambivalent about Houston pursuing Giannis. Would you maybe reconsider that given the way that this season has gone? Going the other way, would you reconsider the Kevin Durant trade? Like looking back on that now, was that the right trade? I'll leave that to you and then I'll get into some of my thoughts.
I didn't like the addition of Kevin Durant, mainly just because he didn't really fit the timeline at his age. But I think it was still a fine risk assessment, just trading one pretty good first round pick and one pretty good player in Dylan Brooks. I think for the most part, Jalen Green was salary filler to make it work. You talk about their scouting. Yeah, I think they did a pretty good. They've done mostly good in the draft. The one miss, and I'm no one ever really talks about it. But like the one really big blemish is that the Rockets took Jalen Green number 2 over Evan Mobley. A couple other players could have gone after, but I think it goes to show how well a job they've done. In the how good the body of work is, that's never something that is held against them. So at the same time, like Amin Thompson, he was the best player available, kind of fell in their laps. The real good like scouting victory is Şengün. We touched on that with OKC to identify him at 16th overall and trading 2 first round picks that really weren't the value. That's a great move. The Harden trade, I continue to say, like, I continue to push back on people who say, oh, well, like, why does it matter if the team trades 4 picks? They're going to get the star. The picks are going to suck anyways. Like, another one of those examples where the team, like, 8 or 9 times out of 10, 8 or 9 times out of 10 that gets the picks usually comes out on top. And Houston, like, they really handicapped the Nets, and that led to getting more higher quality of picks that eventually led to getting KD for the price they did. So just really good strategy as far as like asset management. You touched on negotiating with their own players. That Şengün contract, the I think the Jabari Smith contract was really good. I'm going to be very fascinated to see how they go about the Amen Thompson contract, because a year ago from now we were thinking, he might be close to a no-brainer max. I was thinking that. Now that's he's not a max player. Like so far, he hasn't like he's
Mhm.
not good. He's not shown that right now. So I'm gonna be. I still don't know exactly like what the price tag like will kind of land at. So that's gonna be really fascinating to see. And I'm sure there's a team equipped for that with in Houston. So yeah, I mean, going back to should they look at Giannis? I think so. And I'm not saying this because again, like I know what's going on with KD. I don't know, who knows if whatever he said or may not have said is that if that's gonna like really impact the locker room. But if you're telling me, would you rather pay 36, 37-year-old KD a max contract over the next few years or get Giannis, even though Giannis doesn't exactly like they need the KD type more than Giannis. I would rather just take the chance on Giannis and figure out the rest of the pieces around it later. Try to get more shooting, more scoring elsewhere. As far as replacing that salary slot, yeah, I would go from KD to Giannis for sure.
But you would pay the premium on top of that. You wouldn't be trying to have Giannis and KD together. You'd be like, because I mean, realistically, I think Milwaukee would want either Amin or Şengün. I think when people have talked about this, they've kind of assumed, oh, it would be Şengün plus salary plus picks or whatever. Like
Yeah.
you're thinking it would be KD, like maybe KD and Amin.
So yeah, I'm pulling up their cap sheet right now because it is one of KD or Şengün that has to go realistically. And a year ago, we were talking about it being Şengün. And the first half of his season, it was starting to look like, yeah, no way Houston should trade Şengün. Like they were just gelling. It just seemed like they're in a good spot. They don't need to trade for Giannis. Now, the last month or so, it's starting to fall apart. I think a lot of like Şengün offensively hasn't been quite the same. So I'm sure that as depending on the result of the season, they might be a little more open to trading either player. But you know me, I'm a long term guy. I want the younger player. Like if I can turn KD and not too many picks into Giannis, I'd probably go that route. But it's just kind of early to tell right now. I really don't know, but I'm definitely more open minded again about trading Şengün if needed to make the salary work and the value as well.
Yeah, what we talked about with Giannis was always like it wasn't necessarily a matter of cost. It was that they had built this roster that didn't really suit Giannis. And what the argument would be now is this a roster worth preserving? Why wouldn't you just get Giannis, blow it up, and like totally reconfigure your team from the ground up? This team might not be good enough to preserve. What I would say is that I think if Fred VanVleet and Steven Adams were healthy, they'd probably be a contender and everything would be copacetic right now. Like, I think this is as simple as two of their best players got hurt, and that really changed the entire configuration of their season. I think you could argue that they should have used the Van Vliet salary to trade for another guard. But as I said earlier, I think they're just really committed to getting Reed Shepard on the floor. And the front office didn't want Ime Udoka to like have some veteran that you could play on top of Reed Shepard. I think the front office is very high on Reed Shepard. And I think justifiably so. As far as the Durant trade goes, ultimately, I think the cost was like pretty minimal. It just depends on what you think of that number 10 overall pick, right? Because they could have taken Cedric Coward. They weren't going to take Queen because they already had Şengün and those guys are just duplicative. But they could have taken Cedric Coward and then just not signed Dorian Finney-Smith, and that would look a whole lot better. I would counter that I don't know if Ime Udoka was going to play another rookie. They were trying to win the championship this season. He might have just languished on that bench. So I think trading the number 10 overall pick for something they were going to use did make sense. They got off of Jalen Green, who I think we both think is a bad contract. Losing Dylan Brooks hurts. It clearly hurt the culture. He's done wonders in Phoenix. I don't think Dylan Brooks is like this foundational player that you really have to preserve at all costs. So I am ultimately completely on board with what Houston has done. The Giannis question will pop back up over the summer, and we'll talk about that more inevitably when that comes. But for now, I think, yeah, just stay the course. You have this really young roster. We haven't mentioned Tari Eason yet, by the way. That's another big draft win for them. You have this very young team with all of these assets. I would be totally comfortable playing this out over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, keeping all of those picks and saying, we bet at some point in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, some first team All NBA player in his 20s is going to force a trade. And when that happens, we can be at the front of the line because we have the most stuff to trade. I think that's going to be how this inevitably plays out.
Yeah, we'll see. As to your Brooks point, I think in the long run he wasn't gonna stick around anyways. That was more so a hey, let's bridge this rebuild into being like a competitive team, and he more than helped in that role. Exceeded the value of his contract. He was probably gonna be replaced by the eventual contracts of Amin Thompson and Tari Eason. Those are coming up. In the short term, Dorian Finney-Smith, although that hasn't worked out yet. And with Reed Shepherd, even if Houston isn't so high on him anymore, I think it is right that they just spend the rest of the season just making sure he gets as much reps as possible so they could know for sure and make a decision. Because the earlier you can figure out if he's going to be a part of your main core or not, the easier it'll be to get off him, move on from him while he still has some value. Maybe he could be a part of some bigger trade. So I think, and especially now, I don't know. I would guess internally they're probably thinking, yeah, we're not going to make a deep playoff run. But at the same time, we can't really get off this path. We're still very much trying to figure out exactly who Reed is. I think they're still trying to figure out exactly who Amin is, although I'm pretty sure I feel confident they're going to keep him in their long term plans. Now is a good time to really figure out who it is that they want to keep versus put in a potential big trade.
I have one last Houston thought. They were kind of the initiator of this offensive rebounding trend that has swept through the NBA this season. And I think there is something to that, right? Where I think they were one of the first teams to realize I think shot selection as a real edge had kind of hit its peak where you couldn't just win by shooting more threes anymore. And they were one of the first teams, and Boston to an extent in different ways, and Oklahoma City in different ways. Oklahoma City and Boston did this through turnovers. Houston did it through rebounding to kind of realize, okay, the next frontier, now that shot selection has kind of been optimized, is the possession game where we're going to get every offensive rebound, and that's going to be the thing that gives us this huge advantage. And it by and large did. They were always great with Steven Adams on the floor. Those double big lineups were crazy. We were talking about this because no other team was really doing anything like that, and it really, really worked. So they are very innovative. They're at the forefront of basketball strategy. I think they're very, very smart. I've seen people disagree and say it's a little crazy to have them this high. I would again just say every team besides the top two does have some warts.
Yeah. Okay. Here where I think we could start to differ a little bit. I think for the most part, Houston, it's more so like a confidence thing that I think they will be in the top three. But number four, you've got San Antonio. I think they're definitely top tier. I'm not sure if they're like top five-ish, just because it's hard for me to put aside the amount of luck that they've had in the lottery over these past few years. Uh Wemby, uh Dylan Harper. I know I'm missing why Stephon Castle.
Well, they didn't move up for Castle. That was just where they picked. That was just they were the fourth worst team and they had the fourth pick.
Yes, but getting a top four pick means you got lucky enough to get to be in the lottery to get like that pick. Like especially since every team in the top, when you're top five, you actually have bigger odds to fall down. So, but to their credit, taking Stephon Castle was not an obvious pick. Like that was that I think people were very mixed on him on what he could be, and he's so far like he was the best player last year. He's improved upon that. He's the best player from that draft this year so far. So that pick is a home run. Like they're fortunate to have to be able to select him, but then actually selecting him, that's huge. But at the same time, not the best luck, not the best selections in the lottery. Jeremy Sohan, that didn't work out. Josh Primo, that didn't work out. Um, Negotiating with their players, I think they're like all right. But we still don't really know the full test. Like, and we'll see. Obviously, Wemby's going to get a max. We'll see what happens with Castle. Like the Cornet deal is really creative. I like that. The Vassell deal, that one is more so like they just had no money to spend, so giving him that much money, while it's probably going to help in the back end once the salary cap rises up, it they're in a good position to offer that type of contract. But he's he's good, but he's not played to the value of that contract. The Keldon deal, now that we're at the end of it, now he's finally starting to come up to that. But for the most part, that deal was, I think, mostly negative. You know how I feel about the Fox deal. I like that. I don't think he was a no-brainer max guy. I think a lot of these other guards getting no-brainer max contracts like Jamal Murray too. There's someone else I can't. I'm
Devin
forgetting who just
Booker.
got. Yeah, I think those are going to be negative for the most part. But they're really good at trades. Obviously, getting De'Aaron Fox, they traded, they got him for like, I call it like a sign and trade type of trade where you're just kind of, you're going to get him anyways. So you're just giving up the picks that don't really matter to you to just like give the other team a bone, just something for to get him a little earlier. But most of their trades recently have been with the Kings, the Bulls, teams that are much lower in this. So like at least, okay, I'll give them credit for knowing who to work with, but uh, yeah, just it's hard for me. So I think they've done a great job for sure. Really good at asset management, getting all these picks and getting these pick swaps that are, I think, going to add value to their picks in the future for a potential trade. Like they're good. They're definitely like top 10 ish. It's just hard for me. I think we needed more time to see just how well this front office is with like the top of the top, because it's just hard for me to separate all this luck so far.
More time is kind of funny considering they won 5 championships in 20 years. Like they've got a pretty big track record. I know it's not like entirely the same group of people. Like RC, I think, is the team president and does a lot of the business stuff now. I don't know that he's, like I think Wright came in and is more like doing the day to day. And Pop, of course, we don't know the exact extent of his involvement now, but like the people who built the dynasty are still there. I trust the infrastructure. I trust the ownership. Yeah, the Josh Primo and Jeremy Sohan picks were bad. I'm not going to deny that. They did get very, very lucky in the lottery. And if they do turn into a champion, a dynasty, whatever, lottery luck is going to be the single biggest factor. There's no denying that, right? Getting Wemby and Castle and Harper, it's a no brainer. Like, no, I don't know if any team has ever gotten that lucky in the lottery, at least over a short period of time. That being said, they've won the minutes this year that Wemby and Castle haven't played. Like they're still a very good team even without those guys. So I trust the overall team building instincts around them. Um, the Luke Cornett contract, I think, was very good. They saw something in a player that other teams didn't. Like, I'm a little confused as to why the Lakers didn't make this offer for Luke Cornett. He's a lot better than DeAndre Ayton. There are all these centers out there, and I think Luke Cornett was the best of them last offseason. Yeah, you do get points for trading with the Bulls and Kings. Why don't other teams do this more? They're very, very opportunistic. They didn't plan to trade for Harrison Barnes, but they saw a chance to get an ultra valuable first round swap and they ran with it. And kudos to them. It was a very, very smart trade. Harrison Barnes has been very good for them, and they now have what we think is going to be a pretty valuable pick in 2031. I'm just a little confused at like, is your knock essentially the contracts? I know the Vassell contract was bad at the Hyatt at the front, but it descends, and I think it descends this year, and then it's like stop. I don't know the exact structure off the top of my head, but it broadly descends or stabilizes. So as the cap goes up, that contract is going to look a lot better. The De'Aaron Fox max is just the cost of doing business, right? Like Rich Paul did you a favor by steering De'Aaron Fox to your team. You have to pay that favor back by giving him the max. Is that contract going to age especially well? I'm not sure, but De'Aaron Fox has been everything that they've wanted him to be now. Like they have a chance to win the championship this season because they have De'Aaron Fox. If they hadn't made that trade, they probably wouldn't be contenders this season. He's the second best player on their team. What I do want to bring up though is what we kind of saw develop after the De'Aaron Fox trade was the cratering of the point guard trade market. Knowing what you know now, and again, that's impossible because we didn't know they were going to get Dylan Harper, but like knowing what you know now, I wonder if they maybe would have tried to trade for Lowry Markkanen instead, or trade for Trey Murphy, or trade for somebody else just because they weren't going to need the guard. But ultimately, if the Fox trade accelerates their contending timeline by 2 years, I don't think it's going to be so bad on the back end that that's not a trade you would still make.
My main knock is just I doubt anyone considers them quite this high if they weren't if they didn't have the luck, especially the luck to get Victor Wembanyama. I would guess they'd be a lot closer to the bottom of this top 10. Um, so
Okay, well, can we game
I
that out for a second? Like, let's say hypothetically they pick eighth and seventh in the last two drafts instead of Castle and Harper. They still have Victor, and I think with Victor they'd still have Fox. And if you move forward with Victor, with Fox, with a bunch of assets moving forward, and with whoever you got at seventh and eighth, they wouldn't be this good, but they'd still be really, really solid, right?
No, you're right that they did a good job in figuring out the foundation of this team because this team has been good even in all the time that they didn't have Wemby. So that there's something to that. Um, but I don't know. I just don't know if they're like we're just like I'm just getting really granular. I'm just saying I think they're for sure in the top 10. I just don't know if we're talking about like top 5. And this is where the luck really might play in.
Yeah, I mean, I had them at number 3 in the July rankings, and the luck mattered enough that I moved them down to number 4. I also like trendsetters, and you brought up the pick swaps. I don't think people appreciate just how significant those pick swaps are going to be. They have one of them this year with Atlanta that's going to take them from number 30 into the lottery, right? Like they might jump up to the top 4 again. I don't know how we'll evaluate them fairly if they do, but there is a chance that can happen. They have Boston 2028, Minnesota and Dallas in 2030, and Sacramento in 2031. What they've effectively done there is set themselves up to try to get another top pick right as Victor is hitting his absolute prime when he's in his mid 20s. And the idea there is right as Fox is aging out, or we start to get really expensive, maybe we're paying Harper and Castle the max, we'll be able to cycle in another really cheap high end prospect. I don't think that we've ever seen a team with a prospect like Victor be that intentional about thinking 6, 7, 8 years down the line. But I think they managed that really, really effectively. And I think we're going to see more teams start to do that. Oklahoma City has kind of gotten on that as well. So I think more of these teams that are asset rich are going to recognize the value in saying, hey, we have this late first round pick. Some team needs it to make a role player trade. Let's get a swap from them 7 years down the line and use that as a lottery ticket. I think they were trendsetters, and I think that matters.
Yeah. And they'll definitely if those if they're able to turn like a I think they'll do some trades to boost the present. If they're able to turn like just maybe one or two of those picks, not give out everything that they've got and then bring in like an all-star level player, even just like a really high-end starter, and it's because these picks have all this variance with the swaps on there, then just they'll yeah the process should probably have them a lot higher on this list because that's just long-term vision, being able to get these picks, turn picks that might not have much value now into something that is actually attractive to other teams. uh all right, so number 5, Cleveland. So I'm kind of similar. I feel like maybe I'm not quite this high on them, but I'll kick it to you. Why do you have them this high?
I think they're one of the most underrated front offices. We don't talk about Cleveland as being this great organization, but then you look up and down at all the moves they've made and they've almost all worked, right? Like not only did they get Donovan Mitchell, they convinced Donovan Mitchell to stay in Cleveland, which is no easy task, right? We were talking about him as somebody who was earmarked for New York, and they've now convinced him to extend in Cleveland, and like they're really building the team around him. And the James Harden trade was a signal to me that Donovan Mitchell is invested there, but he wants to have a say, and he felt they needed another playmaker, and I mostly agree with that, which leads into my next point. The Donovan Mitchell or the Darius Garland for James Harden trade was kind of crazy when we first heard about it, But the more we thought about it, the more we're like, oh, this is unconventional, but it kind of makes a lot of sense because they didn't trust Darius Garland to stay healthy. How many teams would have just held on to Garland forever and watched his value fritter away to nothing? Like they were proactive about that. They got a player who's, I would say, better this year. They help their championship odds right now, which I think has a lot of value given how weak the East is. But they also cleaned up their books because they hit on another first round pick, Jalen Tyson, who's going to be very expensive that they're going to have to re-sign down the line. They got Jared Allen for basically nothing. I know you're not crazy about that extension, but they traded, I think, the 29th or 30th overall pick to get him. One of the worst picks. They just swooped into the James Harden trade with Houston, plucked him out, and said, oh, cool, thanks for the All Star. They've done very, very well in the margins. Sam Merrill out of nowhere has been critical for them. Tomlin, Craig Porter, like they've consistently done very, very well with undrafted guys, free agents, second round picks, et cetera, et cetera. I just really like pretty much everything that they've done. Oh, and on the cherry on top of this, we're in the Apron era where every team is like really hesitant to spend money. They have an owner in Dan Gilbert who will pay whatever it takes to win. And I think that's a real competitive advantage in this era now.
I think you sold me. They belong up here for sure. The Donovan Mitchell trade is that one or 2 out of 10 times that when you trade for the All Star, it does work out for you. So they get the risk assessment there that it worked out. With the Garland trade, I think time will really tell on that one. If they go to the finals in these one of these 2 years, then it'll probably work out. And anyways, like we talked about when we first discussed this trade, it's Garland was probably not going to be in Cleveland for the long run, given his contractual demands. The Cavs exceedingly high payroll, second apron stuff, all that. Where this is one way to do it, but uh, if you obviously, if I don't like the idea of Houston bringing in KD, I wasn't that happy, I guess, or that high on them going from Garland 10 years older to Harden, but that was a win. Like, let's save the season and next season trade because Garland, it just seems now that we're seeing some of these updates reports on the Clippers, he can't play this year. He's just so injured. His foot, his toe, whatever it is. It seems like he was just not gonna be ready to play this year, and even if he makes it back, like at that point, it's unlikely he's gonna get to the form that he was last year. So I get it. Obviously, there's also some Donovan Mitchell factors like this might get him to extend this summer. Maybe Mitchell and Garland weren't really seeing eye to eye, so there's those factors as well that probably pushed it even more. So I think time will tell, but I get the risk. I get why they went ahead and did it. You talked about Jalen Tyson. Also, I think the thing that kind of had me go down a little bit was they were pretty lucky with some of their lottery picks. They were lucky to get the picks to get Mobley, but again, he was the best player available, fell in their lap. Same thing with Garland in
Are we sure they were
2019.
lucky with Garland? They picked fifth. I don't know
I
that they were
think
lucky
I
yet.
I think they were lucky because you look at the top of the 2019 draft now, like who goes number one in that draft? I think now, like looking back, getting number one or number two or number three, like getting the highest picks in that draft was actually unlucky. So for them to have the fifth pick and get Garland, I think like when you look at everything that's happened since, that might have been the best value pick up there, right?
I'm looking at this draft class now because Garland's durability is such a question as well. I have no earthly idea who would go number one in a redraft because Zion has had his issues. John Morant has had his issues. RJ Barrett, not really a top three pick quality guy. DeAndre Hunter, no. Garland, no. Jarrett Culver, LOL. Kobe White, Jackson Hayes. The only other guy in this class that made an all star team was Tyler Hero. And I don't think anybody would want to use the number one overall pick on Tyler Hero. So I'm asking myself, like, the guy in this draft class that I think I would most want on my team is like Nikhil Alexander Walker or maybe PJ Washington or Cam Johnson. Like, there are good role players in this class, but there's not really a great like star build your team around guy in this entire class. Yeah,
I
2019 is not looking great.
I feel like just given what we know now from these past 7 years, I would probably take Garland first. Now, you can make a case maybe Josh should still go first because you, depending on your team and situation, you might have had like a 2 year window to actually win a championship with him in like 22, 23. But the Garland injury stuff, I think it's most he's been mostly injured. He's had injuries throughout his career, but I think only like really now it's starting to become like this is the biggest problem year I think it's been with injury. Like, has he had a worse injury year than this one?
Well,
I
he had several.
anticipate.
Now,
Yeah.
some of them were very different, right? Like he had the broken face year that ruined a season, but that's not like an injury that we'd really expect to recur. The toe last year kind of ruined their playoffs. And like, by the way, I think there's a world in which if Garland is healthy in the playoffs last year, they just win the East and maybe the championship. I don't
Yeah.
think people properly appreciate how significant Garland's injury was last year.
Yeah. But back to the Cavs. The other thing that I'll give them a lot of credit for, really good advanced scouting. They're really good at finding like undrafted talent, second draft players, second round picks, like Dean Wade, Sam Merrill, Craig Porter Jr., and then recently Naquan Tomlin. I think Tyrese Proctor will be useful for them. So really good at finding these players, and really good at negotiating their contracts. Like that Dean Wade contract is really, really like just really good cheap value with their rising payroll. Sam Merrill's kind of similar percentage of the cap. I love that deal a lot. Just good at negotiating contracts like below max contracts. Uh, the Jared Allen contract, the first one, him making $20 million a year. We'll see how this next one looks. I was pretty low on it at first. Now seeing him play with Harden, I'm starting to be I'm starting to come around to it a little bit more, but we'll see. The Strus contract, he's injured this year, but the first 2 years he was awesome for them. Um, Even like the Isaac Okoro contract, I think that's still a fine contract, especially like considering the amount they gave him after the pretty good year he had heading into it. It just that with the expectations as high as they are, they need a lot more from him. But then you look at him for the Bulls now, like that's a fine contract given the role and that he's playing and where that team is. So really good at negotiating with their players. Really good at identifying other players. You mentioned Jared Allen, bringing in Max Drews, bringing in Keon Ellis, I think, and then I'm sure they're going to negotiate a good contract for him. So yeah, they belong up here.
Even the times they miss, I like the kinds of misses they make. Where we thought the Lonzo Ball trade was great, right? Where they were going to lose Ty Jerome and they needed better point of attack defense at guard. And they thought, well, Lonzo Ball can replace both Ty Jerome and Isaac Okoro. It didn't work out that way, but it made sense at the time. I think we both agreed with the trade. DeAndre Hunter was sort of the same, where they're giving up pick swaps and matching salary for somebody that they thought could start for them last year. And based on the year that he was having in Atlanta, that was a totally justifiable decision on their part. They were properly aggressive and they got somebody that we really liked. It didn't work out, but I like the mistakes that they make. The other thing that nobody really talks about for Cleveland, because they traded him after a year, they were right about Lauri Markkanen on multiple levels, right? Not only were they right about how good a player he was, they were using him at small forward before anybody thought that was feasible. They were playing those giant lineups with Allen, Mobley, and Markkanen. I don't think many other teams would have been innovative enough to try that. So I give them a lot of credit for just being able to look around the league and say, like Boston, oh, this is a guy that on another team is in this role, but we think we can do better with him. We can, bring him in and give him a bigger role, and it's really, really going to work out. So, yeah, I don't think we talk about the Cavs as like a tier one elite organization, but I'm not really sure why. I think they're exceptionally well run.
Yeah, I think now we're like only now I'm starting to realize it. I think it just took some
Mhm.
time.
Let's take a quick break.
And we're back. We're done with the top five. We got five more to go. Next up, Sam, you've got the Indiana Pacers. Let me hear your rationale.
They're the best second drafting team in the NBA. Tyrese Halliburton is the obvious example of that. But Obi Toppin, Aaron Nesmith, they just do a very, very good job of looking at young players that teams are mishandling, bring them in, and getting the most out of them. They've drafted very, very well. Andrew Nemhard is a good example of that. Benedict Mathurin obviously didn't pan out for them because they didn't have a role available for him, but he's looking very, very good for the Clippers as well. I wonder how much credit I should give their front office versus their coaching staff. I know that I give credit for hiring the right coaches, but it's not like they discovered Rick Carlisle. He was a Hall of Fame coach before they hired him. Having Rick Carlisle to develop your players and implement a system is a big advantage that other teams don't have. So I do get a little bit iffy on how much credit I should give them. But they built a finals team mostly without tanking, right? Like that sort of speaks for itself. The Pascal Siakam trade was absolutely brilliant, home run. The trade they made with New Orleans to get their first round pick back last year, I don't know what they knew about Tyrese Halliburton, and I'm willing to believe they didn't know there was a significant Achilles risk, but just good on them for covering their bases. That's just something that a smart team does. And the move that we seem to disagree with or disagree about the most is Ivica Zubac. I know you think they gave up too much to get him. What I would argue is you don't win championships by accident. You have to take big risks. There is a chance that they give up the number 5 pick in this loaded draft and that trade doesn't look nearly as good. There's also a world in which they have both Ivica Zubac and a top 4 pick. And I think that's the sort of high risk, high reward move you have to make if you're seriously going to contend with the teams like Oklahoma City and San Antonio moving forward, because they have such an asset surplus that they don't have to take major risks to get high reward. If you're going to keep up with them, you kind of have to take big risks. I like the risks that they took. The finals run last year was a major like eye opener for me. I think I had them like 15th when I did this last year at the trade deadline. I've gained a new appreciation for them as a front office. The big question is obviously the money. Are they ever going to be willing to pay the luxury tax? Letting Miles Turner go looks better now than it did at the time. I do wonder, though, when the time comes, are they going to be willing to pay what it takes to keep this team together? That is a real concern. But otherwise, I just don't know how much lower you can go for a team that made the finals without doing the overt tanking, overt asset accumulation, overt we're trading 5 first round picks for somebody right now kind of strategy.
So the thing that I'll give them credit for, and I struggle to kind of know who exactly why things are going this way, but I kind of feel like there is a lot of constraints as far as how the front office can operate, because the one through line with the ownership is that they never ever bottomed out except for this year. But that's because the season just got away from them. They always want it to be as relevant as possible. Like the highest draft pick they ever had before this retool that they had, where they had Mathurin and the Jarris Walker picks, the highest pick they had was the Paul George pick at 10th overall. So I maybe some other like if trying to be like just like a playoff team at all times and trying to like minimize the amount of time they're bad wasn't a like a big deal for them, maybe they would have gone longer with some of these retools. Maybe they would have gone for higher picks, but I still got to give them credit. Like they define good value at these picks. So like I said, it's not the same front office, but Paul George at 10, like clearly they're doing something right to find value wherever they select, finding value in free agency. Like even when they pivoted away from the Paul George team, they managed to still be a pretty good team immediately. So like I'm sure there are other teams that have to work within these constraints. And again, this is just like my speculation based on how just the patterns I'm seeing. Uh, I'm guessing they have a lot of like constraints, and I think they do really well within them. Um, so even though, for example, the 22 retool, I think at the time you and I both felt it was probably a little too quick for our taste, and maybe they didn't go as aggressive as we think they should. It still worked out just because of the Halliburton trade. He like getting that's basically like not too far from getting a number 1 or number 2 pick. Even though they traded Sabonis. So I think they always find a way to balance these things out. I'd push back on their draft success a little bit. Like you mentioned Mathurin, yeah, in the context of the Pacers, not I think he's still a good player, and I think he should still get like a pretty good contract this summer. But also with Jarris Walker, who's starting to come around a little bit, Goga, who started to come around after he left Indiana, Aaron Holiday, Chris Duarte, Johnny Furphy, like Ben Shepherd, like no one really popped for me other than Nemhard. That pick was amazing. So really good at putting this team together because mostly everyone on this team's a transplant. So great at free agency signings, great at trades. You talk about the Pascal Siakam trade; they got him for nothing. For like they gave out the same amount of picks, like the same type of like volume of picks for Siakam as Zubats, but I think like you could see immediately like those picks they gave to Siakam were not going to be a value. Two of them were in the upcoming draft that year, and then the other one, the value that ended up being a value, as you mentioned, they eventually got back from the Pelicans when the Raptors sent it to them. Um, so I they work hard. They do a pretty good job. I don't know. I just don't know if I truly feel like they're quite in this tier. Maybe I would think they might be right outside the top 10, but they definitely deserve a lot of credit. The other trade I was thinking of, they get Neesmith thrown in for Brogdon trade. Incredible trade. You get Obi Toppin for virtually nothing, 2 seconds, bring in Jay Huff. So they do a really good job at bringing in the right players to keep the team competitive now. We'll just see about if they're willing to pay Zubats because they're gonna pay him. You don't give up as many picks as you do without having an idea of what you're gonna pay the guy. I don't think it's gonna be a Miles Turner situation for people. That does still that whole process with Miles Turner, then re-signing Isaiah Jackson. Like what happened there? Like I don't know.
Yeah, I disagreed with the Isaiah Jackson move, but again, everybody has blemishes at this, even at this point of the list. You bring up the Paul George trade, and again, I think that's just an example of something that this team does really well, and it's an example that I point to for GMs that are trading stars. It's so easy to just be like, "Oh, we're trading our best player for 4 first-round picks, and like maybe they'll be good, maybe they won't." That's such a team by team situation. The Pacers traded Paul George, didn't get a single pick back, and I think won the trade, right? When you look at what they got, they identified 2 young players on another team that they liked more than the league, and they were right on both of them. Victor Oladipo comes over there and is immediately a star. Obviously, his body didn't hold up, but they were absolutely right about him as a player. And then Domantas Sabonis is the guy they eventually flipped to get Tyrese Halliburton. So, like, even going that far back, I think like 8 or 9 years now, they've been good at the same things, identifying good young players on other teams that they can plug into their own system. And I know that they rebuilt the system around Halliburton, but can plug into their own organization and say, we can get more out of this player than this other team can. And like to do that with the Thunder is pretty impressive, right? Like Oladipo and Sabonis, I guess they were only there for 1 year each. So like who knows what they would have become. But like they took 2 guys from the Thunder and made them better, which is pretty impressive to me.
You know what? I think I think they do kind of belong here because the next team that you have, they did a lot of similar stuff. The New
Mm-hmm.
York Knicks. So it wouldn't make sense if I said like Indiana was not in this tier, but the Knicks are.
And they've
Uh,
beaten them in back-to-back postseasons. Like there is, to some extent, we do have to look at actual success and track record. And like the Pacers making the finals gets them a layer of respect that other teams that some people might rank higher wouldn't. And I know Knicks fans see this and they say there's nobody they would take over except OKC and Boston. The Knicks do have a pretty big blemish, which we'll get to in a moment. The successes, though, are pretty steep, right? Jalen Brunson is the best free agent signing of this decade. And then they got him on one of the best extensions in the NBA. I was trying to think of when was the last free agent signing before Brunson that was better. And the answer I came up with was Durant in 2019, not because it worked out so well for the Nets, but because they traded him for the full draft. So I think the Knicks probably have gotten more value out of Jalen Brunson than any team has out
I'll
of any.
just sorry to interrupt, but it's like now with the depth of free agency, that was like a perfect storm of factors, like especially Dallas just fucking it up throughout the entire length of Brunson's contract. Like since the moment they signed him, they were pretty much like messed up that contract where Made it really vulnerable for him to leave them. Um, yeah, like that is the defining free agency signing of this decade. Like I don't think there's gonna be anything that tops it.
They've quietly drafted very, very well. Emmanuel Quickly at number 25, Deuce McBride at number 36. I like Tyler Kolek, although getting Jose Alvarado has probably marginalized him. The only real miss that they had was ironically drafting Obi Toppin over Tyrese Halliburton. But if they drafted Tyrese Halliburton, like maybe the Brunson stuff never happens. Like I don't really want to go too far down that rabbit hole. It all kind of worked out. They're so good at managing the cap. They were really at the forefront of team options on their contracts. They were at the forefront of declining salaries that, you sign a player at a high number and every year that goes down 8%. They've been so smart at managing their long-term financial vision. We've talked about this a lot. They set up the books for this team with a 4-year window in mind, where the third and fourth year would be their second apron years. Last year and this year would be the just below the second apron years. They've managed it very, very effectively. They're so good on the margins. The Jose Alvarado trade thus far has been an absolute win. There are two questions here, and I'll start with the obvious one, which is the 2-star trades they made. They pushed all of their assets in for Mikal Bridges and Karl Anthony Towns, and neither of those trades right now looks like a win. So I'll ask you this before we get into the other stuff. Knowing everything that you know now, would you make both of these trades, neither of these trades, or one of them? And if so, which one?
I wouldn't do the Mikal Bridges trade. You guys can find back 2 years ago when it happened. I loved it way more for the Nets. I just think that was too much value for the Knicks. One of my best friends who's a Knicks fan just says like, "Oh, those picks are gonna suck. We're gonna be so good." We'll see about that. We're
Let's talk
still
in
very
2031.
like it's easy to say that when two of those picks were Ben Saraf and Danny Wolf. So, but we'll see. We'll see. Either way, that's an overpay for him. The cat trade. The only reason I think they had to do it because you talk about Obi Toppin over Tyrese Halliburton being their biggest blunder, which yeah, it is. I think the other blunder that they did, and you and I have talked about it, was not giving Isaiah Hardenstein a third year on his contract.
Hey, hang
Which
on.
they couldn't have anticipated that he was gonna be as impactful as he was. But that basically, like, if they were able to keep Hardenstein, they wouldn't have done the cat trade. But given that he left and there was really nothing they could do to keep him, I think that was a trade they just had to do because they could not have gone into last season with the center rotation that they had. Mitchell Robinson didn't even play until like February, something like that.
And Precious Achiuwa was hurt at the beginning of the year too. They literally did not have a center.
They didn't. I don't think they had Precious. Oh yeah, they did have Precious Achiuwa. Yeah.
No, they had Huck Porty. That was it because he was playing real backup minutes early in that season.
So I think like because Hardenstein, if they kept Hardenstein, I don't think they would have traded for Cap. But they had, just given everything that happened, they had to do it. I still think I would do that. I still think the value they traded to get him wasn't like it's pretty low relative to other star trades. Like that's a lot closer to like what the Rockets gave up for Durant. A lot of like what stars are kind of going for now. At least they didn't give up like they gave up the haul for Mikal Bridges, which that was the mistake. But maybe they would have had to give up more if they didn't do the Mikal Bridges trade. Maybe the Wolves would have asked for more picks naturally. But I like the value that they gave up for Towns. Like, what else were they going to do? They had to do it.
So, case in point with Hartenstein, they ultimately got punished because they signed him to too good of a contract, right? Because if they had paid him a little bit more, then the early bird number would have been higher and they would have just been able to keep him. The problem wasn't just that he only signed for 2 years. The problem was that his salary was so low that they couldn't give him a big enough raise to keep him. But I'm not going to look harshly on a team for signing a player to a contract that's too good, because at that point, what you're saying is every contract should be 3 years. I'm not totally against that in theory. If a team wanted to say, we are never putting ourselves in that situation, every contract we sign is going to be for 3 years under the logic that we always want to maintain our flexibility to keep guys and we can always move a bad contract if we need to. Ultimately, you're right about Mikal Bridges. I think that is kind of a no-brainer at this point. They were trading for the guy that we saw right after he got traded to Brooklyn, where he's averaging 25 a game, and his defensive reputation was still what it was in Phoenix, and it hadn't declined. And I don't think we'd appreciate it at that point just how contact diverse he can be. They just misevaluated the player. Like, it's kind of that simple. Towns is a little bit more interesting. And honestly, the way I look at it, and I don't know, like, with some stars, you really couldn't have afforded to basically punt most of last season. I think you have enough buy-in from Jalen Brunson that you actually might have been able to get away with just like not having a center for most of last season because you're not going to worry about him demanding a trade, right? Like, I think you could have just said, look, Jalen, I know it's unfortunate. We're going to probably not be championship contenders this year, but we're not going to rush into a trade that we think is rash. We're going to keep our team in place. And like, say they would have just kept the or the Boyan Bogdanovic contract that was at like $20 million. They would have had all their picks. Could they have gone out and shopped around for like Nikola Vucevic for one first round pick and kind of, kept the tide, kept it up, like kept going, just gotten like a marginal starting center and then figured out the long term later? I think, given everything we know now, that's probably what I would have done. I would have just traded for some other lower end starting center and kept my powder dry. Just given where we are with Giannis, I think if they had had all their picks, there's a good chance they would have traded for Giannis. But even if not, the opportunity cost in New York is just so high because it's so easy to convince players to go there. With OG Anunoby, I don't know that you necessarily needed this high end wing defender. Losing Julius Randle's a blow. Like, Julius Randle's been awesome for Minnesota. So is Dante DiVincenzo. I just look at this and I say, like, if you called Minnesota and asked them, hey, would you like a mulligan on this? They'd laugh at you. They'd say no. Minnesota won that trade. I understand why the Knicks had to do it. It was basically the only way to salvage the 24-25 season, in which they almost made the finals. I ultimately think if I could go back, I would undo the cat trade if I were the Knicks. The other question there is the coaching hire. Do you think they got Mike Brown right? And everything leading up to that, too.
We'll see. I think it's still kind of early. I will say, like, I if they wanted to, like, the way the Suns went from Vogel to Bud to Odd, I think the Knicks might not be afraid to have that much coaching debt if they need to make a change yet again. It sounds like I think I understand why they went away from Tibbs. I like if they conclude that Mike Brown's a mistake, I don't think they'd go. It'd be because like they conclude that they shouldn't have left Tibbs. Then maybe they just still don't have the right guy, and we'll see because Mike Brown was like publicly like their 10th option based on all the names that we heard last year. So we'll see who's available. Like if they fall below expectations and in the locker room, they're not really bought into him as much as you'd want, and someone else becomes available that you really like, okay, then maybe they could just make another move. I think they could afford to do that again. I do want to just touch on what you were talking about, like the revisionist history about what we would do with the Mikal Cat stuff, because again, assuming that Hartenstein was always going to leave, there's nothing you could do about that. And I also throw in the other element that it's the Knicks have just really wanted Cat all these years. Like it seems like it was going to be an inevitability that they were going to acquire him. So let's say you don't do the Bridges trade. So you keep all your picks and then maybe you could modify that trade a little more. Maybe you still have that Bogdanovic contract. So maybe with the salary matching, you just trade more picks for Cat with Bogdanovic and you keep DiVincenzo. Um, like I think I'd be more. I would have liked that version a little more. You still preserve maybe 2 or 3 picks that way, um, and so you still have like a little left in the powder to do something. Um, I'm not as opposed to the Cat trade, despite what's going on this season. Like it worked out well last year, going to the conference finals. You and I both agree that the Celtics probably had some issues going on that just it was more of like a it might like in the long run we might look at that as a Celtics more like losing to themselves, beating themselves
Yes.
and the Knicks beating them. Like I'm starting to come around that. But I I still like the theory of the team, and I they could still figure things out. Now,
They
obviously,
could
they
make the
might get
finals this year. Like
yeah,
it's not the door
yeah,
isn't closed. It's just for now.
yeah. Obviously, they could potentially pivot to Giannis, which
Mhm.
if you told me in 2024 that they were able to, after trading all their picks, they can turn Cat and some other starters to Giannis, I would not believe it. And we'll see. Maybe they
I
could still
still
do
don't
it.
believe it, but okay.
I mean, we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
The just some
Wait, let me.
quick. Oh, go ahead.
I have one more thing I want to say about the Knicks. The Mike Brown hire, there's a certain class of hire that I always kind of enjoy where it's usually a big market team is interviewing a lot of coaches and you hear a lot of rumors about they interviewed this guy, but they really want him to be the lead assistant for that guy. And very often when that happens, like maybe you should just hire the second guy. I was in the camp that the Knicks should just hire James Borrego, and there was all this reporting that like they want Mike Brown and have James Borrego as his top assistant, like where Mike Brown is going to be the head coach, but we trust James Borrego to do a lot of the more like playoff tactical stuff. And I'm like, I don't know, maybe you just hire that guy. The Lakers have had some hires that have been like that, where they've had like a really interesting crop of people they've tried to get as assistants, but haven't necessarily nailed the head coaching hires. There are a few hires like that. I would have just hired
Yeah.
James Borrego. Also, they've done very, very well on the margins this year, where like Landry Shamet has been a home run signing for them. They've consistently done very, very well when they've had limited resources. But anyway, what was the last thing you wanted to say?
Just that. So the very first thing we touched on when we transitioned to the Knicks, just excellent advanced scouting. Choosing OG Anunoby, choosing Brunson, giving him the contract they did, choosing Josh Hart, the Isaiah Hartenstein contract, amazing contract. Targeting Jose Alvarado so far, that's like gone as well as like anyone. We like that was so obvious from the like 2 months ago when it was like, I guess you can say it was like leaked that Alvarado would eventually become a Nick. It was just like that was gonna always work out. So excellent at finding exactly who to target. Dante DiVincenzo, just another excellent free agency signing. Like where free agency is dying, then Julius Randle, just another guy. Like they just time and time again continue to know exactly who to bring in, and that player like always usually brings an impact. The one thing, and let's not get too into it, but I have looked like they've drafted very well. You talked about some of their draft hits. And then once they got to the point like 3-4 years ago where they were ready to make the leap into semi contention, then they start trading some of their picks, stop drafting guys again. Like Quentin Grimes was like the last big selection that they had, who was like a role player for a while for them. And then like 2022 draft, they trade the pick that became Usman Jang, who went right before Jalen Williams, Jalen Duren. 2024, they traded out of the Keyshawn George pick. So they were doing these trades where they're liquidating these firsts and trying to get like a higher volume of lesser value firsts, or in the Keyshawn George trade, they got like 5 seconds. I don't know how do you like, do you weigh that at all, that they could have had like some really good talent, like maybe even just like one of these guys on a rookie scale contract to help them with on the bench? Like, I don't know, do you weigh, like, how do you weigh that?
Yeah, I think the Duran pick, because that was a lottery pick at number 13. Like that was one that I really, or was it 12, whatever it was.
They could have taken him there.
Yeah, like they could have taken what's they could have taken Durham, but couldn't they have also taken Jalen Williams?
They had
Or
yeah,
we
that's what I was saying. They had the
yeah, okay.
11th pick, which became, they gave it to OKC to take Usman Jang. Then Jalen Williams went right after Jalen Duren, went right after
Got
that.
it. I think that's one that I kind of question because the picks they got back, even at the time, were not great. Can you correct me on what the picks were? Because I think it was the
Yeah.
Detroit weirdly protected
Mm-hmm.
pick and the Washington top 8 protected pick.
Yeah, they were all looking like fake firsts at the time. There was the Pistons
Yeah.
pick, which was lottery protected through 28. That one eventually conveyed, but it was just like not a pick of value at the time. The Wizards pick, top 8 protected, that's not going to convey. There was a Bucks pick in there that I think like at the time, just with the Giannis uncertainty, it just depended how you felt that was going to shake out. That ended up being either Seraph or Danny Wolf, one of them, and there was another pick in there. They got all these crappy picks, and it just helped them kind of. I don't know how much it helped them because it helped them get Cat in the end, like trading the Detroit pick, helped them get Mikal Bridges with the Bucks pick on top of all their picks. To me, it seems like, unless I'm missing on something, it seems like a pretty net zero impact trade.
Yeah, I think I would have kept the lottery pick. I think this might be a coaching issue too, where we talked about Houston trading number 10 because Ime Udoka was just not going to play rookie. It might have been similar with Tom Thibodeau, where they were good enough that that rookie was just never going to see the floor, so they got what they could. But yeah, I think having a coach who operates that way is probably not for the best. They should have taken Jalen Williams or Jalen
Yeah.
Duren. The Keyshawn George pick is in the 20s or it's 19, whatever it was. I'm fine with that. That's
So,
like you
well,
can't know that
so
Keyshawn
let
George is going to be that
so
good.
let me ask you this: if they drafted Jalen Duren and he panned out similar trajectory as he did with the Pistons, do we have the Knicks much higher on this ranking? Because
Oh yeah,
I think
probably they
so.
might be. They
Yeah.
probably like number 4, number 3, because
So
they're
there's the
ripple down
answer.
effects too, right? They're that yeah. You know what? As you say that, that's fair because they probably wouldn't have made the cat trade in that world, right? Because they would have had
Yeah.
a center that they could have used. Although maybe they would have traded Mitchell Robinson at that point. Who knows? But like,
um.
yeah, you know what? You're right. I think that is something that we should hold against them. I
I
hadn't
mean,
thought about that, but I think you're right.
Jalen Duren seems like Tibbs type. Like I could maybe see a scenario where they would have even traded Jalen Duren, and maybe Tibbs just pushes, no, you cannot trade this guy. Like we need him.
I Tibbs with a young big is kind of scary. Like I don't know if Tibbs would have waited through the developmental period because like Jalen Duren, the first couple of years were kind of rough. Like he was good, you could see it pretty quickly, but there were a lot of little things that he needed to tighten up that I don't know that Tibbs would have waited out. But we've gone long enough on the
Yeah.
Knicks. Let's move on to Utah. Utah
All right.
number 8, too high, too low, just right.
I think they're just right. So with the Jazz, as you guys know, I'm biased toward Danny Ainge. He when he came in and immediately just guns blazing liquidated the team. Rudy Gobert into 5 first-round picks, if you want to include Walker Kessler, who was just a first-round pick at the
Which we
time.
should.
Donovan Mitchell. Okay, that trade not quite a strong value of picks, but
They got
they
Lowry
done.
Marketing.
Yeah, that's they got Larry Markkinen for Donovan
Yeah,
Mitchell
that
for the
trade
most
worked
part.
out fine.
Yeah, they got Larry Mark. I mean, you can say though the way they've been able to then like get ahead of those picks, becoming like apparent that they're not going to be a value, turning a number of them into that Suns pick, able to flip some more of those with the Suns pick for Jaren Jackson. Just good asset management over all around. Like I understand. There was criticism in the beginning that the Jazz were just like getting too many picks, and that they were going to run into some issues with them. And I think they did a pretty reasonable job getting ahead of it with some of these trades they've done in the past year. So just elite asset management. The thing that people want to push back on is the drafting, and I don't know. I think for the most part they I think they like it just took a while. I think they actually drafted pretty well.
Yep.
The biggest thing is if Keontae George didn't didn't have the breakout he had this year, then okay, they probably fairly have a lot more criticism because especially like their first high pick Taylor Hendricks that did not work out. But I I'm pretty confident the Ace Bailey pick's going to work out. Isaiah Collier, he's just like right out the get go, like an NBA level point guard. Bryce Sensabaugh took a while. He's starting to pan out. So, and they're going to have one more pick. I think they drafted well. Just good negotiating. The Markkinen deal, I don't know how to. I'll kick it to you because I feel like this is something where, yeah, it's definitely an overpay. It might trend more towards the negative side. We'll see how that is with the salary cap going up. But it's also kind of one of those things where, like the Pacers giving Siakam the max, you're in this, you have the small market disadvantage. You're gonna have to pay up for some of these guys realistically to have them, which also kind of came into play with them bringing in Jaren Jackson Jr., the other player who got like the same exact renegotiation as Lowry. Um, Overall, I just great vision. It was only a matter of time. Like after the 2021 playoffs, I think everyone knew it was over, and they just needed Ainge to come in and just like really without the attachment to these guys, just put emotion aside and have a great foundation to start. Get all these picks and Lowry and Walker Kessler. Yeah,
They had to pay the tanking tax with Lowry too. Not only are you having him on a bad team for 2 years, but you need him to be on board with like from January on, you just like you might play 15 minutes, you might not play, whatever it is. Not every player of that caliber is going to be on board with that. So part of what you're paying for is like go along with our plan. The drafting, like you said, has looked a lot better this year than it has in the past. Isaiah Collier is like he's not going to get enough minutes because Keontae George is this good and they have Ace Bailey and they're adding another lottery pick. Isaiah Collier is somebody I would be circling as another team, especially a team that needs a point guard. Like Utah is going to have to trade him at some point. He's going to get a little too expensive. I think he's really good. Bryce Sensabaugh, fine. Cody Williams hasn't lived up to his draft position, but I think he's looked better this year than he did last year when he was basically unplayable. They hired Will Hardy, who I think we both think is one of the best coaches in the NBA, a very, very good coach. The big concern that I think anybody might have with this Utah rebuild is that they don't have a top 20 player in the NBA. They don't have somebody you would traditionally look at as the best player on a championship team. Lowry Markkanen and Jaren Jackson are like all-stars, not all NBA types. The team they have right now, it looks like a 50-ish win team when healthy. Like Walker Kessler not being healthy this year has been very, very important for them too. But I think next year he'll be a perfect fit with what they have. But they don't have that all NBA MVP candidate guy. That's not really their fault. They had the worst record in the NBA last year and they picked fifth. You know, like they've tried, they just haven't gotten lucky within the lottery in the way that some other teams have. I also think it's very hard to get that guy externally to Utah. Jaren Jackson is probably the ceiling of the caliber of player you can acquire in that market, even on a 4-year contract, right? Like, you're not trading for, I don't know, Giannis in that market. He's just never going to come. You kind of have to build something and attract people that way. The structure of the Jaren trade I really liked because one of the picks was Phoenix's in 31. That's external, whatever. The other two picks were in 2027. So after the 2027 draft, after next year, they're pick neutral again, which means they can just trade 4 picks for another guy if they need to. If they are a 50 or so win team and they have a chance to get that all NBA guy, they have the assets to do it. I think the question that we both had asked throughout the last several years was should they have moved on Lowry Markkanen? We don't know what the best offer was. Would we have done it? Probably. In the end, did it work out that they didn't? I think so, because they're going to have another lottery pick this year. They have a really good team, and they're still relatively asset rich. So I'm generally on board with the direction. I think, they've gotten a lot of criticism because they've been bad for 4 years. I think they've managed this as well as humanly possible, and they haven't rushed. A lot of owners would do that. A lot of owners would go through 2-3 really bad years and say, you have to try to win this year, which would have been stupid given where they were.
Um, with the Lowry revisionist stuff, I'd love to know what some of their best offers were because I would have to guess that I'm sure there is a timeline where they took some trade, maybe they got even more picks, and through that they're able to either through the draft or parlay some of those picks into a potential top 20-ish guy. But if in the end, I think it's fine, like that they went ahead and did this path because they're gonna be good. They're gonna have a very high floor. You're right. They don't have a top like star level player that can really push them towards like serious championship contention yet. We'll see. I think the biggest chance for that is see what Ace Bailey becomes. But I you mentioned it, like they need to have high draft picks because that is throughout their history how they've gotten all their best players. Darren Williams, Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert. They've drafted all these guys, and like these all these guys that were like really like gave them a pretty high title ceiling, at least for a short amount of time. Um, so I don't fault them for doing what they're doing right now, because that's just the only way they get players. Like even this year we had Ace Bailey. Like the guy was like trying to not go there. Like think about you got like think about that, how like even in the draft they're having some challenges. Like maybe there's more other cases like this that we don't know about. So they're always in a disadvantage towards getting the top guy. And um, obviously this year they're trying to keep their pick. That's the bigger concern. If they can luck up and get a top 3 pick, then they might actually like at least now they could in the short term, maybe they do have like an actual championship window. We'll see, because yeah, they do have the picks to trade for another guy. I guess it just depends on the pick. I doubt that they'll be able to parlay those picks into that guy. They've never done it. Like, who's your best like free agent acquisitions? I want to say
Carlos
like off the
Boozer.
top. Okay, Carlos Boozer. Yeah, there's that. But then like in
Extenuating
recent,
circumstances. I don't think we're
yeah,
repeating the
yeah.
lying to a blind man
But as
stuff that
far as like,
happened in 2004.
but like as far as recent history, it's like Bojan Bogdanovic and like Joe Johnson. Like that was a big deal when they got Joe Johnson, even though he was already like kind of towards he was already on the downward trend of his career. So I think within all these disadvantages, the Jazz just do an impeccable job at building their team.
And like for what it's worth, maybe Keontae George becomes that guy, or maybe Ace Bailey becomes that guy, or maybe they draft that guy with a lottery pick this year. They have enough pathways to getting there that I don't look at them. We're going to get to the Wizards much, much later. The Wizards right now, it's like 2026 lottery pick or bust. Like that's it. There's no other way to get that guy unless they were to trade for him in like a 5 pick trade down the line. Whereas I feel like the Jazz have many more avenues to potentially getting that player. So
Yeah.
I generally feel very good about them. I know that some people have said like, "Oh, how do you rank a team this high when they're losing?" It's like Danny Ainge, like you said, was probably the best GM in the NBA for the 10 years before he left Boston, probably more. Like you get the leash to do this when you have the track record that Danny Ainge does.
Let me take a quick break. So next up, we've got the Philadelphia 76ers. You have them at number 9. Go ahead and make your case for them.
Starts with the track record. Daryl Morey, I know he's a controversial GM, but last year was the first time in 18 years as a GM that he had a losing record. He built a contender in Houston without ever really tanking. That says quite a bit to me. He made one of the best draft picks of the decade in Tyrese Maxey at number 21. He's quietly like, we don't think of Daryl Morey as this great drafting GM because he traded so many picks in Houston. But Jared McCain was a very good pick. I mean, we'll get into the trade, but the pick itself outside of the lottery was very good. He's done well on the margins. Dominic Barlow been a good signing or a good find for them this year. They've Adem Bona, I think, has been a nice find for them as well. They correctly identified last year the need to tank aggressively, and I don't want to say that that totally changed the trajectory of their franchise. Like, I think they'd maybe not be in the worst place if they hadn't done it, but VJ Edgecombe obviously is very, very important to their future. And kudos to them for realizing quickly enough that they could tank and keep their pick. I know the league doesn't like it, but it was the right decision. And when Daryl Morey misses, he makes the kind of misses that I'm on board with. I like when GMs swing big and miss big. I know that the Joel Embiid and Paul George contracts haven't worked out. They look better this year than they did last year, but by and large, you'd still say those are two bad contracts. I'm not going to fault a GM too badly for going big after a former MVP who was already on your team, by the way. Like, if you didn't extend him, you might have to trade him. He was quietly making some noise about, I want to win a championship. I don't care if it's here or somewhere else. Like, you had to do something with Joel Embiid, and I understand extending him when the alternative was an uncertain trade market. And the Paul George situation, it's not like they gave anything up to create that cap space. They traded James Harden and got 2 very good picks from the Clippers to do that. So it wasn't really hard for them to create the cap space. There wasn't much of an opportunity cost there. I don't mind missing in that specific way. I don't mind a GM that swings big and misses, because if you're going to win a championship, you're going to have to take big swings. That's what Daryl Morey does. And I think more often than not, he does it well.
I think this is a pretty appropriate spot for the Sixers. Drafting, like whenever he does a lot better than I think he gets credit for between Maxi at what is it, like 20th? Obviously, like the
21.
VJ, yeah, 21. Like that pick really saved the Sixers, whatever window they had in the early part of the decade. The VJ Edgecombe pick, like that was not an obvious pick at all, and I like again, it's still far too early. A lot of people feel now, like with Con Knipple, he's making a case maybe he should have gone a little higher, but like VJ Edgecombe just plays with a way that like screams he's going to be a star. Like I think he's going to be a couple all-star. He's going to have a couple all-stars at least. Like I think this guy, like he might end up being the best player on the Sixers, uh, in like carrying them pretty far in a couple in like 3-4 years from now. I don't know, I'm just really high on him. And then like there's the McCain pick. A lot of criticism on that trade, but and you and I touched on it. I think just with all the changes to the backcourt, with bringing in VJ, bringing in Quentin Grimes, like McCain was just not going to be able to reach those highs with the Sixers again, which means that his value is probably going to go down over the next few years. So it just made sense to get as much value as they can now, because they were probably going to get less in the future. So like good at getting ahead of certain situations like that. I the I do the one thing I push back on. So the process, as far as like how they went ahead and got the cap space, amazing process between getting Tyrese Maxey to understandably wait and that he'd get paid anyways, to getting positive value for James Harden and help restock their draft picks. And then having all this cap space, obviously I think that you could have done something a little different with the cap space. So like the process in which they got it, incredible, but the one criticism I have is that sometimes I feel like there's just too much emphasis on stars and star power, and I think that was more apt like 10 years ago, like when you look at some of the teams that dominated the Heat, the Warriors, and then when he put together the Rockets team with Harden and Chris Paul, and he was trying to get either Paul George or Melo, assuming Melo was still a star, which he wasn't. Like they were you needed that back then because you could easily find more players on the minimum. There's less restrictions, so you have the mid-level more available to you. The tax system wasn't as hard. Much harder to have like very like star centric team all making max money now, and without like the role players, without the deep rotation to support it. And it still kind of feels like that is the build they're going for, where all their role players are guys that like they're not making around the minimum or less. Like
Well, what
Dominic
choice
Barlow.
did they have? Hang on. What choice did they have given the Embiid and George contracts? We don't know what they're going to go for around Maxey and Edgecombe because they're hampered down by these contracts.
Yeah,
Let's maybe look
what
back
I'm
in a
saying,
couple.
but what I'm saying is that it's the decision to go with these stars, like to have these like three max players. I don't like who's real. Like OKC, okay, they have three max players. They're all making like the 25% max. Two of them are making the 25% max. Like that's not really having two max guys. They have like one max guy. They got two guys. The Sixers have two guys making the 35% max. It's tough. Like that's really like affecting the rest of the roster. Like thank God they have VJ Edgecombe making as little as he is to be as important as he's been for them. So that's that's where I come back on the Paul George signing. I think they'd be a lot better if they didn't sign him and just like maybe either got in a couple other high end starters, or even just like a bunch of role players, or even just taken on some bad money and with some draft picks and try to reset it. I mean, they wouldn't have had cap space in 2025 because the Tyrese Maxey cap hole. So it was like a use it or lose it situation. But that's where I come back on, like, even if it worked, even if Paul George was the player that, let's say he was putting in like $40 million of value annually. He's making 50 million. Let's say he's making like 80% worth of his contract. I still don't think that the way the rest of the roster is being put, it can really hold up. It can really like carry this team further, like to like a true championship level right now.
I'm
That's my
looking at the
biggest. Yeah.
20 yeah. I'm looking at the 2024 free agents right now, and there was nobody else they could have signed. There were rumors about OG Anunoby, and like they could have paid OG Anunoby the max, but the Knicks ended up keeping him. I I think OG Anunoby is a better contract than Paul George. I don't know that OG Anunoby for the max would have been the best thing for Philly.
He'd still
After
be
that, you
making
look
less
at
than Paul George.
right because it was a 30% and not a 35%. But like you look at the free agents that changed teams in 2024, Isaiah Hartenstein, like, okay, maybe just because of Embiid's injuries, but I don't know how you would have managed those two together. After that, it's like, well, you could have signed Kentavious Caldwell Pope. That didn't go well. You could have signed DeMar DeRozan. That didn't go well. Like the guys who changed teams, it's pretty bleak. I don't know that there was really a better thing out there. Maybe there would have been
Yeah,
something on the trade market.
that's where I was
Um,
gonna lead to. When I started the Third Apron channel and I was doing all those mock free agency videos, I suggest, and this is before, like, this is after, just as an example, like I talked about, well, Denny Avdia, he just had this pretty nice breakout with the Wizards. They're probably going to trade him because they are just so far behind. It's going to take them a while before they can be good again for him to really like be a value for them. You have all these extra picks from the Harden trade. Maybe there's something you could do to get a player like him, and he's only costing 14 million, $15 million this year. You go after more other types of players. So I'm not, obviously I didn't think he's going to become the player he is now, but I do think they could have done a lot better on the trade market. And that's just one example. I'm like, there's so many, the point is there's just way more options on the trade market. There's probably a lot of things that we couldn't even conceive of that would have been a lot cheaper on the cap sheet. Okay, would have cost them some more picks, but I think would have made them a meaningfully better team.
I just think there's a lot of hindsight involved in this. Like at the time, Paul George was an all NBA player. Like I think he declined at the worst possible moment for the Sixers. If he had maintained where he was with the Clippers for one more year and Embiid had stayed healthy, which admittedly are two huge ifs, they might have won the championship last year. Like I totally,
Yeah.
where they were at the time, I think it made total sense. Could they have done better? Sure. Should they have been thinking longer term? Probably, but I think also just given where they are now, they have a chance to make up for that because they have these Clipper picks. They'll be able to do it right this time around, and I trust that they ultimately will.
Yeah.
We got to talk about the Jared McCain trade, though. I think the trade itself was probably right, just with VJ and with Grimes. There was not going to be a role big enough for him. He wasn't going to get the shots that he needed. Daryl Morey has gotten a lot of criticism for ignoring some of the intangible elements of building a team. And I think maybe saying we sold high on the guy is kind of an example of that, where I maybe wouldn't have said that publicly. I just don't think that looks great. I think that kind of is throwing a guy under the bus when it wasn't really his fault. He looked awesome. He got hurt. And when he came back, the team was totally different. So that's something that I would throw in there. But all in all, this is a team where it's just you trust the vision and you trust the overall, like the track record of the GM. I understand some of your concern. They are valid and you can ding them for it. I think it looked a lot better at the time than it does now. And I do give them some credit for that.
But so here's the thing. Now Paul George's contract is going to be halfway done. It's going to be easier to trade him. Would you just trade him for like another star, or would you consider breaking down that contract for like mainly some cap relief, some nice role players, maybe some young players if possible, some draft picks if possible? Because my instinct that he would try to get like the next available star if possible, and I I just think with the uncertainty with Embiid making as much money as he is, I don't. I wouldn't want to take that chance right now. I'd more so be looking ahead to seeing how we could get Maxi, get ready to build the team around Maxey and Edgecombe after Embiid.
That's sort of what I'm thinking too. I would personally be trying to use that salary slot on George to trade for a cheaper wing defender and a center who could be a backup when Embiid is healthy, but could also start when
Yeah.
he's not. Like whoever the next version of Isaiah Hartenstein is. Like that's probably what I would be trying to do. If he does make another ill-advised star trade, and thankfully what I'll say is by virtue of having Maxey and Edgecombe both as guards, he's not going to trade for another like high usage guy. If he trades for a quote unquote star, like whoever that is, it's probably going to be somebody who leans more towards defense and is probably a winger or big. So I think that just makes more sense
Yeah.
given what they have anyway.
Oh, I thought you were going to say something.
Yeah, I kind of had a
Yeah.
tone where I was leaning. I just sort of, yeah, I know what
So and look, the other thing is that Edgecombe, like, if they really believe he's gonna be that star, then that kind of alleviates the pressure of needing to get a quote unquote star with that Paul George salary slot. Like you can go into the next few seasons and say, all right, we've got a star in Maxi, we've got a star in Edgecombe, we have a star in Embiid. Now let's just like actually have like a good supporting cast around them. Let's dedicate this $50 million to some other high level starters because I think that's what they need to do. Like no team really does as well as like working around the margins to have as much talent as they do. That's like it's good enough to make the playoffs, but they just haven't had a meaningful run. And some of that is injury related. But I think if they had like a stronger level of depth, I would feel a lot stronger about their chances in the near term.
Yeah, let's see how the next year or two goes. I think they'll do something interesting with that Paul George salary slot at some point.
All right, final team in this top 10, the Minnesota Timberwolves. You have the floor.
Yeah, this is another track record pick to an extent. Tim Connolly built the Nuggets. He drafted Nikola Jokic, number 41 or 42 overall, whatever it was. You get a lot of credit for that. Traded for Aaron Gordon there, drafted Jamal Murray, did the heavy lifting of building that championship team. I love how bold he is. I love how willing he is to take major swings. The Rudy Gobert trade, I still think it was an overpay, especially knowing what Walker Kessler has become. The big issue for me with that trade is less like the raw cost and more the opportunity cost, where
Yes.
if they had had Walker Kessler and they had seen what he was going to become, and then you have all of these picks with Anthony Edwards, like a lot of guys are going to want to play with Anthony Edwards. You could have done some very interesting things. I look at that one as probably a miss, but they've made back-to-back Western Conference finals. So there is a success element where I have to say, like, would I have done it? No. Has it worked? Broadly, sure. They could make the finals this year. The Karl Anthony Towns trade, no-brainer success. Like, I know we talked about the Knicks end. It's a little bit more complicated there. They won that trade from their end. They came away out of that trade better than, like, they'd rather have what they got than what they gave up. They've done well in the margins. They found players like Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I know they lost him, and we hate that, but they replace him well with Ayo Dosunmu. I think they came out of that okay. A big question I have for them is ownership. Are they willing to spend the money that they're going to need to spend? Ultimately, like I know we're very impressed that they traded Mike Conley and got him back. They ultimately gave up a first round pick swap just to save a bunch of money in practice. I know that there was a lot of like, oh, this could help them get Giannis. I never really saw that. I saw like the paths I saw to Giannis did not necessarily involve getting below the first apron. I didn't think that was a big issue. It seems like they just saved a bunch of tax money and there was no real basketball motivation to that. So I kind of have that as
Yeah.
a question mark. There was some reporting from Woj before the sale went through that this ownership group really wanted to deduct the tax. I'll keep an eye on that in the years to come. But ultimately, I like a front office that saw what they had in Anthony Edwards and said, we're not going to be patient. We're going to run. We're going to try to win. I have questions longer term because, they keep trying to pull rabbits out of the hat and I don't want to say almost got Giannis. We don't think that they did, but they came closer to getting Giannis than like any of us thought they could, right? Like being
Yeah.
able to potentially eventually turn Jaden McDaniels into another star is something that like gives them a little bit more optionality. They were very smart, by the way, to keep Jaden McDaniels out of that Rudy Gobert trade. That was the big thing they touted when the trade happened. And sure enough, Jaden McDaniels has turned into that guy where it's like, oh, okay, you were right. It was good that you kept Jaden McDaniels out of this trade. So I like how aggressive they are. That's their big the big point in their favor. I see a lot of similarities between Minnesota and Cleveland, just in the way that they've operated. The difference, of course, being Minnesota is not seemingly as willing to pay the tax as Dan Gilbert is. But by and large, I think they're pretty well run.
So the thing that really defines them, as you mentioned, is their if the Suns are, I guess, the ballsiest team in the league for trading as much as they did for Durant, trading whatever they had left for Beal, just like going all in on each opportunity that presents itself to them, then the Wolves are probably like the second team behind there, because you talk about the Rudy Gobert trade. They traded all their picks, literally every pick that they could, plus Walker Kessler, so like effectively 5 first round picks. They put all their eggs in that basket. Like, and they've done this again. Like they traded the next available first round pick 2 years later with a pick swap to trade up for the pick that to get the Rob Dillingham pick. So whenever they're not afraid to take a really big risk. And with the Gobert trade, looked really, really bad at first. That first season was a disaster. And then it looks like it's gonna work out. Like this will probably be like that other 1 out of 10, 2 out of 10 that it works out for the team. Because I still feel pretty now. I've come around on it. Just it's worked out, but it easily could have not worked out. And as with the Rob Dillingham trade, it did not work out. Didn't. And they were able to get out quick enough where they're able to turn him into Ayo Dosunmu, although that cost an additional 4 second round picks. So I I respect that they're willing to do it, but I I don't know. I might be a little lower than you on them just because it so easily could have not worked out, especially the Gobert trade. But they're really good at finding the pieces to support all this. You got Rudy Gobert making a lot of money. You got Anthony Edwards making a lot of money. They identified a lot of good players on pretty good deals between Dante DiVincenzo and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Uh, Obviously, the Cat trade. I still think it's too early to conclude that. I think like it's so interesting. Like it feels like the scale on that just kind of like tips back and forth. And right now, it's clearly on Minnesota's end. But for a Cat trade, that's a pretty good one. Don't I really can't imagine there would have been something a little even better for them, especially because and they're lucky in the sense that the Knicks wanted Cat that badly. Uh, like Randall was a guy I was apprehensive can actually
We
be
both were.
can be a good second or third option on a great team, because it just seemed like what Tibbs manufactured with him being the first option on like a pretty good team was just so like unique, and it was just not translatable elsewhere. But I think from that experience, he was able to develop into like a pretty good second or third option. So that worked out really well. Good at negotiating contracts with your players. That Jaden McDaniels contract is incredible. The Rudy Gobert contract that they just gave him, I think that's a pretty good value. Nas Reed contract, kind of questionable. We'll see. But so overall, I think they're like pretty above average. I don't know if I have them top 10, but I wouldn't have them too far below either.
I want to go back to the Dillingham trade. It didn't work out. It was very creative in a way that I don't think we've ever really seen a team do before. Have we ever seen a team trade like multiple picks 5-6 years in the future for a top 10 pick in the present? I think they kind of created that concept, right?
I can't recall any other trade like this.
Well, the reason I bring this up too is like I think the idea they deserve some credit for it, just they got the wrong guy. There wasn't really anyone. That 24 draft was kind of a mess. If they'd done it a year later for Egor Gemin, like then that looks a little bit better. I liked the idea. They just landed on the wrong player. So I give them some points for creativity at least. Do you think like let's say Giannis is off the table. They can't get Giannis. Would you trade McDaniels for some other star? Like I look ahead over the next few years, and Rudy is getting a little bit older, and Dante is going to get expensive. I think after next year is his last year. They're going to have to pay Ayo Dosunmu. Conley obviously on the way out, like he's just getting too old. There is some transition coming here in the next 1, 2, 3 years. And I'm just curious what exactly we think that's going to be, because like something we had talked about like before the season, I even mentioned like, what if they looked into trading Rudy Gobert and just leaning more into Naz Reid and the younger guys? That obviously didn't happen, but like sooner or later, they're probably going to have to either take a step further in or take a step further out. I'm not sure which it is. Their history suggests it's going to be a step further in. The case in point, they pursued Giannis. So they are in this weird position that's eerily similar to me, not entirely similar, but somewhat similar to where Milwaukee was with Giannis, where they went all the way in and they had to keep going further in order to keep getting his buy-in. But Anthony Edwards is only 24 and they're already out of picks. And that's the one thing that I do kind of worry about, where like, where are you going to be when he's 27, 28, and you still don't have picks?
I have an answer. You actually suggested to me earlier this month for who that should be.
Go for it. I don't even remember who I said.
So obviously they're going to be linked to Giannis. They'll try to go after him. They'll, the thing is, we've stepped away from the Giannis rumors, and we start. Obviously, I'm not thinking about Giannis rumors right now until we get to like May. But we know that it's gonna take the Wolves like this completely dismantling their roster between trading Jaden McDaniels and probably like two other starters at least, not only to meet the value but to actually make the money work. When the Clippers had their trade deadline, they traded Harden, they traded Zubats. You raised the idea that hey, like we got to start talking about Kawhi Leonard's future, and I think we're gonna need to start talking about it anyways. If like Sam Amick was reporting, now there's speculation that the NBA could come down on the Clippers, and that could mean an exit for Kawhi if he gets his contract voided, or maybe he has to get traded. I think I would just do that if I'm the Wolves, because what if you don't? I don't think you ought to trade Jaden McDaniels to get Kawhi. Like you talked about, like a Randall plus another player plus a pick base package. Okay, maybe you need to trade one of they'll unlock their 2033 first round pick. They can trade that in the offseason. Okay, maybe you trade that. I would rather do that if he only costs Randall and then like maybe one other player off the bench versus trading three starters and all your whatever picks you have for Giannis. I don't know. What would you rather do?
That is such a big risk given Kawhi's injury risks and the personality. I would have been much more on board with doing that for like 4 months, where you're getting him in February and you only have to keep him upright through June. Doing that for a whole season is definitely kind of scary. The other thing is, if they get Kawhi, they're going to have to aggregate to do it, which means they'd be second apron hard capped, which makes it harder to re-sign Ayo Dosunmu.
The same with
And you'd have
Giannis.
to, true, but Giannis is just so good that you figure out the supporting cast later. The other thing is, I guess it'd probably have to be Randall and Reed if you're going to give away more salary than Kawhi, and therefore avoid the first apron hard
Yeah.
cap. Would you give up Randall, Reed, and a first round pick? That's a lot for the risk that is Kawhi. You'd have to be getting something else back too, I think.
I guess it just depends on what the other offers look like, because I would guess that the Kawhi offers are going to be closer to the KD trade package that Houston gave up, if not maybe a little less. Um, so you're talking about Randall, you need to get to what Kawhi makes 50 million, 50.3. So Randall and either Reed or DiVincenzo. If it's DiVincenzo, you could maybe sign and trade someone to make the rest of the money work. The thing is, would they need Rudy Gobert? And I'm afraid that getting Giannis will require them sending out Rudy Gobert. Like we're seeing like just how vital Gobert is. I just want to like, do you think they can get Giannis without trading Gobert?
I
I'd rather
think
just like if you can make a team that's Edwards, Kawhi, Gobert, McDaniels. I think I'd rather do that than go for the Giannis option. I might be in the
it's just
minority of that.
the tough thing too is if you're getting honest, you do have to give up McDaniels. And if you're giving up McDaniels and Gobert, like I know Edwards is a good defender, but Edwards is a good defender in the way that like most stars are good defenders, where they're good, but you don't want them like guarding the best player in the other team too often because they have such a big offensive load. Like you want them to have like the fourth biggest defensive responsibility in your starting lineup, not like guarding the best perimeter player on the other team every night. I don't know. That is tough, but I think Kawhi is difficult as well. I don't have a clear answer, but I'm very interested to see what Tim Conley does because you just know he's going to swing big one way or another. I don't know what it's going to be, but he's going to come up with something creative.
All right, Sam. So that is part one of your rankings, your 10 best teams. The one team I would say I would have had much higher that's not included are the Grizzlies. And well, sounds like they're going to come up pretty early on the next episode, right?
They will be the first team we talk about in the next episode. So you pushed back on the Spurs at number 4, by the way. Who would you rank at number 4?
Okay, let me pull up your list again. I would probably go Cavs, Knicks, Pacers, and then Spurs. And again, like a lot of that
Okay.
is I need to see a little. I think we just need more time with the Spurs. It's the same thing. I forgot which team we're talking about. Like with the Celtics, we're talking about. Well, there's just so much we don't know about Brad Stevens' ability to build a team because he never had the opportunity to like rebuild from scratch. It's like the same thing with the Spurs right now that they just had so many good, so much luck to get such great players. Like it's hard to see. It's hard to like really put them that high for me with the lack of adversity that they've had in recent years.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. There's, like we ordered them slightly differently, but I think we're in the same general region.
Yeah. All right, Sam, let's wrap it up. Anything you want us to be on the lookout for? Any plugs?
Read CBS Sports. All my stuff is there. Nothing too big on the horizon, but you never know. We'll see.
And make sure you are following Sam on CBS, Sam Quinn CBS. Follow him on Twitter. You make sure you guys are subscribing to Third Apron wherever you get your podcasts. We will be pretty active doing a couple more of. We're going to do all other 20 teams in this ranking over the next week or so. Make sure you are subscribed to Third Apron. I've been very active here, posting a lot. I've reacted to basically every major trade. I just wrote about the Lakers, and I'm gonna start writing about some of the teams who didn't really do that much. Having a sale right now. Get in before it expires at the end of the week. And yeah, just be on the lookout for us. Thanks for following us, supporting us, and we will see you soon.